Well, hello everyone. My name is Gas Denota, and I'm working for Precision Agriculture based in Griffith. We are here today in Marramai in a paddock of Pat Sergi. Pat is a grower I know for a while. He wished to do all the agronomy for him. And today, particularly, we are doing grid mapping in one of his rice blocks. And basically, we're gonna do like a full soil sampling thing, which involves grid mapping, EMs, and follow up with strategics. And that's one thing we wanted to discuss a bit, the differences between the different types of soil sampling or soil testing, we call it, you know? So as there are a lot of things that they come under the umbrella of soil testing, and basically at Precision Agriculture, there are 4 of them that we sort of address and tackle pretty well. One is EMs, the second one is grid mapping, the third one is strategics, and the last one is carbon. And EMs is the traditional survey of measuring the soil, the texture of the soil. Grid mapping is a predetermined grid that we apply in a field or in a paddock or in the base, and we create a grid and we measure every single hectare in this case, and we measure the variability in between. Then strategics is probably the most common traditional soil sample, which is basically running a transect, taking a few cores and send them to a lab. And finally, carbon is how we create the carbon baseline in a farm, and that's the beginning of the journey in the future for anyone trying to get any outcome from that, you know? So basically, with EMs, everyone has some kind of experience before, and they sort of measure the texture in the subsoil, whereas grid mapping does all the actual sampling in the topsoil. And in a season by season thing is probably the way to go. Once the farm is fully developed and laser like this one, with all its base and everything in place, what we like to do is to run grid mapping in a predetermined grid size, which here we're gonna do 1 hectare. And doing that, we can later on variable rate every single input, such as gypsum, lime, phosphorus, nitrogen, urea. So we customize everything according to the target and the products that the farmer wants to use. We do. So the best way to use the EMs always have to be followed up by strategics. So we need to ground truth the EMs. Basically, after creating the different zones and areas of management, we had to run a few strategics within each zone to create the variable rate maps application. So doing EMs, we can get variable rate maps and follow up with the proper applications. So applications of gypsum, lime, MAP, phosphorus. The only one probably that you had to measure apart from that is nitrogen. I had to do it only with strategics. That's why we got a different practice, which is called grid mapping, and we're gonna talk later about this. So there are different theories and schools out there. Many people, they run off the NDVIs, satellite imagery. There are quite a few different tools we can use on a monthly or weekly basis. One thing we always say from Precision Ag is soil doesn't lie, and at the end of the day, the soil is your true asset. So all the rest can be affected by a seasonal change. Could be, waterlogging, could be insects, could be anything else. So the crop, not necessarily like measuring something in the crop will relate 100% to the soil. That's why for us, the number 1 priority is to measure the soil variability. The best time to do EMs is in the quiet time of the year. First of all, because the block has to be in fallow like this one. So we can run, we can take the time, we can book the job, we can do the service properly the way we like to do it. And I would say anytime after harvest or after, in case of rice, probably after burning until sowing. And even if you need to, we can sneak in between the rice and the wheat crop and the winter crop. So we have that facility, that capacity of maneuver, we can definitely get it done. So the best interpretation would be following up with strategics. So at the end of the day, EMs is a lot of information that we still need to ground truth it to create the variable rate maps. So once we create all different zones and the areas of the farm and within the blocks, we can later on run strategics and tell you exactly what is what, and compare apples with apples, you know. So it could be M41, 38, what sort of depth they've been done with or they've been working on, and according to that, see the variability that is within, and to make a strategic plan following the EMs. So let's say the EMs are the raw matter, and later on running strategics, doing the famous ground truthing of the farm. With that, we can actually give value and use EMs. Like in any irrigated crop, we can only make decisions after measuring. So if we don't quantify what's out there, we are pretty much blind, or we repeat what we done previous years. So if you want to make some valuable changes, the number one priority is to measure. In case of rice, there's a lot of variability that has to be addressed and measured, like any other crop. And if we don't measure that, we can expect to change anything, because it's always a gut feeling that won't take us, to better decisions or improved decisions. So in rice, this, as we know, is a waterlogged crop. Half of the season is grown under waterlogging conditions. So what happens in the top 20-25 of the soil is what really determines the main parameters of the yield. So let's say in rice, if we, for example, urea, a topic so important, if we don't measure that in every single hectare, the chances of blowing out the crop are much higher. And that's something that with grid mapping, this new service we provide, it's not that new, but new for rice, and could be very helpful, because it's going to stop growers from over applying or under applying. What we normally say is undercooking or overcooking in certain areas, and that's with every single input. Not only urea, could be gypsum, lime, MAP, granular oxide, anything, Well, grid mapping, it's a service that we provide, and what we do covers absolutely everything. So from the sampling on farm that we're doing now, to taking all the samples through the lab, and then getting the results, the maps, the combined maps, and later on doing the variable rate maps according to the products and targets that the farmer is using. And that is a whole process that sounds very long, but only takes us 2 to 3 weeks. Grid mapping, it's a way of sampling the soil in a predetermined grid size. So it could be 1, 2, or 4 hectares. The more intensive the crops are, the more we need to intensify the grid mapping, such as here, where we do 1 hectare grid in rice. And doing that, we can apply inputs accordingly every 1 hectare. So every single hectare we can treat them differently, which we don't do it for the operator. It's exactly the same job. We just run everything variable rate. Variable rate means the controller will be catching the difference, the variation every hectare, and adapting and changing according to that. So basically grid mapping is, some people they say it's the best spend dollar you can do in soil sampling. I like it because we are addressing and tackling the topsoil, the top 20-25 centimeters of the soil in case of rice. In cotton, normally we do the top 30. And doing that give us a lot of information about how much variability we have, and it can bring up to 70% of savings. And that's something really attainable. I'm not talking something we do or we see every single day. And on top of that, it's not only saving. Many people, they consider or they do grid mapping for the saving side, but actually the number one priority here is the better allocation of inputs. So we are not undercooking or overcooking certain areas. We are applying what we need to get the target and the uniformity in the crop that we want. I would recommend so grid mapping, normally it's something that used to be done every 4 or 5 years after lasering the blocks. So as we know, in this area, there's a lot of cut and fill areas, and normally all the topsoil has been dumped in some sections, and the cut areas of the subsoil has been exposed to the surface. So those areas are the ones that normally pull down the yield. And if you want to achieve the uniformity that we're looking for, grid mapping is the way to go, because it will be applied in the beginning of your crop, in the top 20-25 centimeters, and that's gonna help farmers to make decisions in terms of how much inputs they need. And some things are short term, some are long term. Let's say if we fix a pH, that's for the lifespan of the farm. And some others, like for example, getting the right amount of urea every hectare in rice is so important because that's going to help us to achieve two things: the potential of the crop and to avoid blowing up the crop. So instead of like harvesting or like stripping a deck, we can get the crop to the right amount of N and the right measuring every single hectare, not just guessing or and normally what the findings or what the kind of feedback we get is all the savings in inputs more than justify the service. That's the kind of equation we always run.